November 6, 2019 to order. Ms. Allen, will you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Scares?
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman?
Yes.
Mrs. Judah Freeman?
Yes.
And Ms. Moore?
Yes, the meeting has now been called to order. Please join us for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I now need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and we have a second. Any changes, any addendums, additions?
No.
Okay, being none, Ms. Allen, will you call the roll?
Mr. Scares?
Yes.
Mrs. Judah Freeman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman?
Yes.
And Ms. Moore?
Yes, the agenda has been adopted. Next item up is the November 2019 five-year forecast. Our treasurer and CFO, Janice Allen.
Okay, in front of you, I downloaded the PowerPoint, and I also downloaded the 5-year and the notes. And so you can either just follow along or follow along on the screen. I also took the liberty of making large copies of the 5-year as we talk for the 5 years so that you can see it, because it's very difficult to see on the screen.
I got an extra pen.
Okay, basically, I wanted to.
The text, Mr. Andrews.
Okay, turn it on.
He couldn't.
Last week?
Yeah, so I don't know.
Okay, so I wanted to remind you guys that this November 5-year forecast is something different. We normally have done it in October, but through a House bill that was effective last November, they changed the date. Now, why, I'm not totally sure, but we do have an extra month to file these 5-year forecasts. Again, all of the forecasts have 3 years actual. So this forecast that we're talking about is FY 17, 18, and 19 with the actual numbers. And then our projected 5-year, and that's 20, the current FY 20 through 23. As I go through this, can you all look at the 5-year forecast at the same time? Because I'm going to talk about line numbers.
You have service in it?
I don't.
You do?
I don't.
Yeah, but you.
So, line 1.01 is the general property tax. Line 1.02 is tangible property, which is in fact public utility property. So that's your gas companies, your telephone companies, your railroad companies. 1.035 is the unsecured state foundation monies. 1.05 is the property tax allocation, which is a credit from the state for homestead and rollback that our senior citizens get, and our residents get 12.5% rollback tax credit. And the last one was all other revenues, and all other revenues can include tuition, facility rental, things like outside of this revenue. And so when I talk through this, from 20 to 24, we basically have estimated all of those revenue streams to be flat. No increases. At this point that I know of, hopefully the state legislature is going to surprise me in another year or two. But basically, particularly the state foundation on line 1.035, you can see that that's all flat from 2020 to 2024. We have had the luxury in the last, I think, 4 years of having increased state foundation monies every year. And so as you look at this, this is $5 million that we basically are not getting any longer. Because what they've said is the funding levels for it will match the funding levels for FY19. And so that hurts urban districts like ourselves because we need more resources.
Give me that name again.
I'm sorry.
What was that you said they were cutting?
Foundation.
State Foundation. So on the 5-year, Norman, it says unrestricted states grants and aid,
Mm-hmm.
but it's another name, it's State Foundation monies.
Okay.
The other fact that I wanted to just say is our ADM, which is our average daily membership, drives our money. And so that's all of our students, not just the students that come to school here. We projected on this forecast 3,350 in FY20. At this point, when I ran a report, we're about 138 fewer than the estimate. I'm not, really nervous about that because things can change. So when we file in May, we can update that figure and we can then see more accurate data at that time.
What did you say you based it on? What number?
I looked at the October number 2 foundation settlement report.
Uh-huh. But on how many, what?
3,350.
Okay.
What was an estimate. And the foundation settlement report said 3,212. Now keep in mind, that's average daily membership. That's all of our students. Now, the other piece of it is that, the good piece of it is that we have a student enrollment count per the same report of 2,625 students. And that's consistent with every report that I get every day. And Marlon gets the same report, Lisa gets the same report, and it's called Daily Attendance Percentage Summary Report that we receive from Meta Solutions. So those numbers are right in line in terms of our current student count. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and on one hand, I'm a little nervous about not receiving that $1 million. On the other hand, because they said our funding is going to be flat, then our ADM can fluctuate up or down, and we still will receive the same amount of money. Okay, so House Bill 166 is our the new state biennium budget, and as I said earlier, it froze our levels back to the FY19 levels, and as I said, we've enjoyed the last 4 years of $1 million. The other thing that the House Bill 166 provided was the student wellness and success dollars. So the Trotwood-Madison will receive $622,213 in FY20 and $896,037 in FY21. So these dollars are restricted and we have to follow a plan. And so Marlon's working with Montgomery County ESC to formulate the plan, and then they'll sign off on the plan and we'll file the plan. I just thought through that, and that's our $1 million right there. You know what I'm saying? That's our $1 million and another route. I wish we had that plus the other millions. So that's probably what they could have to come back and say to me, that we're giving you that money. So that just came to me overnight.
So is that included in the 26 mil?
So he's not coming his back.
The wellness dollars, are they included in
No,
the?
So
Okay.
wellness dollars is not in the 5-year forecast. It's outside of the 5-year forecast.
And we didn't include it because
We don't
we're,
include it because the state told us not to include it.
oh, okay.
So they gave us direction not to include that. Okay, so another fact, we eliminated $500,000 per year for the budget reserve. So for those, well, I think most of you were here in May. The May 5-year forecast had $500,000 of budget reserve. We eliminated that in order to pick up $2.5 million. We're looking at 2023 to make, 2024 to make sure that that is at least positive. Now, from now until we get there, there's going to be a lot of changes. This is just an estimate. This is just a vision. We can change this tomorrow if we want to. We can file it next month. We can file it in January. Normally, school districts don't do that. This gives the state just an idea that we're not in dire financial straits. Another good positive thing is if you look at your 5-year forecast all the way to 2024, we have a positive cash balance of 213,443, which isn't, run home to mom about, but we were trying to get it at least positive. So our first go round was 18 million negative. Oh, no, that's not the plan. So we actually went back through and we looked at every single line to see where we could change things, reduce expenditures, and come up with at least a positive cash balance. In September, obviously, we ratified a new 3-year TMEA agreement, and this did require additional costs. So that additional cost you will see in the salaries, tuition reimbursements, and other supplemental position increases. And then, as you remember, in FY20 only, we gave each employee who had family medical coverage $720 for the year, or $60 for the month, for their medical insurance premium. So beginning in FY21 next year, and actually we will start in February of 20, we will start, Marla and I will sit down and start planning for FY21. And we're going to go from top down. We're going to look at every single stone. We're going to overturn every stone to make sure that our class sizes are commensurate with the teachers. We're going to make sure that the resources are commensurate with what the total student population is. We're going to do a lot of different exercises to make sure that we're in line. Also, obviously, the biggest expense is 3.01, which is personnel services, and that's salaries. And so what we've done is taken a very aggressive leap to say from 20 to 24, we're going to hold salaries the same. So what that means is even though there might be an increase of 2.5% at FY21, there is a 2% increase in 22, 23 and 24, we just baked in 1%. We have to look at either through attrition or other means to make sure that we hit those bogeys in terms of our salaries. Because we don't have the luxury, if we don't do that, we won't have the luxury to come out of 2024 with a positive cash balance. This year, Marlon and I, through our many exercises, we actually reduced the materials and supply line by $300,000, and then was consistent from 22 to 24 on. Capital outlay beginning also on FY20, we reduced it by $400,000, and we're going to look at this. I have FY21 and 24, there was no bus purchases, but the superintendent said, well, maybe FY21 and 22, but we'll look at that to see how our fleet looks and where we need to make those bus purchases. But for the next 2 years, we will not be making any but more bus purchases. The other thing I wanted to call your attention to is line 4.3, which is other objects. And when Marlon and I were looking at this, I think Marlon asked me a question, why do we increase from 19 to 20? We're going to also be looking at this. These are the ESC contracts. Mm-hmm. And we are spending a lot of money with ESC. We just got to make sure that what money we're spending is the best bang for our buck.
And I think we had talked about this before. It was looking at what our contract was the previous year and the one for this year, because it went from, I think, like 500 or some thousand.
So we have that. I think I showed you that report. That's the report I was.
Right.
Yeah.
So they give us a report at the end of the year to say FY19 actual and then what we're projecting in FY20. So I know FY20 is 1.7, and if I vaguely remember, it was 1.4 or something like that from last year.
Oh, the actual.
Mm-hmm. I can get that. I can go and get it after I'm finished.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there are a number of students that includes our Trotwood students that are physically at their schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are, yes. So those are the services that they are providing for our students. Or, for our
That are
students.
there.
And it might be occupational therapists, it might be, I don't know, mental health.
Emotionally disturbed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just know that years ago, we would know that those students were no longer there. They're transferred out. So how do we track to make sure the number that they're accounting for us is accurate?
Right.
Yes.
Actually, we had a meeting at the beginning of the year, Ms. Minor and her staff, and my staff, to say just that, Vanessa. We want to make sure that we verify any invoice that we're paying. I don't want people just to sign a date it. I want someone to go through and say, okay, this is our kid, this is our kid, this isn't our kid, take that off, and that.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Minor is,
And our special ed supervisors physically go to the building a couple of times a month. for
Okay.
meetings, just to verify and to check on our students that are there.
Yeah, and haven't moved to like Dayton or somewhere else, because that used to be the problem many years ago.
this schedule shows you revenues, FY19 actuals versus our forecast. So the FY19 actuals, you can see that property taxes came in at 7.4 million. State foundation was 29.4. Homestead and rollback, or the property tax allocation, was 1.1. Other revenue was 1.6. Total other sources was 72. So the total actual was 39,786. We are trying to keep everything pretty consistent with FY20, with some reductions. And so, I'm sorry, for revenue, it's about it's pretty consistent within $288,000. So we're pretty confident that those numbers can hold. I did the same thing for expenditures. You can see for expenditure salary, who told me I can do this? See that? Salaries for expenditures FY19 versus FY20, you can see there's a $1.1 million increase. And if you go down, you can see that we spent $43.7 million. We're projecting 45.5. And there's a variance or an increase of $1.7 million from this last year to this year. Keep in mind that a lot of that increase has to do with the 3.5% increase and the steps, and also some of the new negotiated items, such as the tuition reimbursement and some supplemental position increases. I broke the expenditures down just a little further and wanted you to see FY18 actual, FY19 actual, and FY20 projected. And so you can see that in FY18, we spent only $37.8 million, and 19, 43.7, and 45.5 for FY20. We want to not necessarily get back to the FY18 levels, but we want to make sure that we're squeezing every single line that we can to save money.
What was the big variance between 18 and 19? I mean, I know it's hard to pinpoint one thing.
Oh, I can tell you, I can pick one thing right now. Purchase services, Harvey Silver, for instance, and I mean, we spend a lot of money on Harvard Silver, for instance, and that's purchase services. Supplies and material, that's $600,000 more. There was a lot of furniture built, a lot of furniture bought. I'm not sure if we had a lot of academic supplies and material.
It was mostly the salaries. I know we went through a huge hiring thing late 2018. That'll probably be the biggest difference for.
Yeah, we're talking, but I was talking about purchase services. So that was one of the major things was that. Other objects, that's huge, from FY18 to FY19. Other objects is like tuition payments, facility rental, different things like that, that was an increase of almost 400,000
For expenditures?
for expenditures for other objects under that category.
Why would building rental be an expenditure?
For,
Facility rental. Facility rental, we might have to rent the tennis courts for our tennis team. We might have to do
Who would have to rent them?
our athletic department. So some of that does come through other objects.
but we wouldn't,
And that under their budget, I mean.
that would be ours.
Are you
right?
talking about
I'm
things that are outside of the district?
Yes, outside of the district. So,
Like graduation.
yes, like, thank you.
Oh,
thank you,
okay,
thank you.
okay.
Okay, like graduation or,
Rental.
okay.
You know, that to rent the convention center, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's not a huge expense though.
No.
Yeah, but
Those
probably.
are just some
Some-
examples.
just some
but
smaller.
If you want me to drill down to it, I can give you.
Can you
some.
drill down on
I will.
other objects?
Purchase
FY
services,
18 to FY 19?
Mm-hmm.
purchase services also included some of those contracts, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And where did the marketing costs
Yes,
go?
yes.
Because we paid
Yes.
quite a bit for marketing. And
That was a purchase service.
So, and
Mhm.
that was 150, right? Was that 100?
Even.
100,000.
100,000? Yeah, so it wasn't exorbitant when you're looking at these big numbers of millions.
it just adds to it
It
though.
just adds to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we got a
Yeah.
return on investment.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at. Return
We got a return on
investment, we
investment for
got
that.
kids back, we got additional kids, and so we have to look at what is advantageous too. Spend money sometimes to make money.
Okay, this is just a graph, and it shows the revenue. I gotta look closer because I don't have it. The revenue is the blue line, and the expenditures is the red line, and then your ending balance is the green line. So you can see that we're taking a huge dip from 17 to 24, I think it's $9 million to 200,000. As your expenditures go up and your revenue goes down, I always equate that to an alligator look, and it's like eating us up. We don't want to be there, so we got to find ways that we can control our cost and increase the revenue. This is just the ending cash balance, and you can see that was from 2017 to 2024, and it gives you a 60-day cash ratio, ending cash balance, and then the unencumbered. Unencumbered balance means without the purchase orders. Okay, this is one of my graphs that I like a lot. Revenue sources, if you look at the revenue sources at the top, our estimated for FY 20 is 39,798, 379. That ties back to line 1.07 on your 5-year forecast. And so all of that is broken up. So the majority of the revenues come from the state. So we have 74% from the state foundation and another almost 3% coming from the state of Ohio, and that would be like the homestead tax credits. Real estate is 17%, and then we have other local, which is when people pay us different money to use our buildings and that kind of thing. We have 4% on other local in terms of revenue sources. Again, challenges to our operating revenue. Again, our House Bill 166, as I stated before, is frozen from FY 20 to 21. So we forecasted the revenue flat from FY 20 to 24. Fixed rate levies cannot generate any more revenues. And so I meant to put another slide in here to show what a fixed rate levy is. And so House Bill 920 was put in place when the values of the houses were going down. So as they went down, I'm trying to see, the rate went up. And so, but if we passed an 8.15 mil levy, that's all you can ever gain from that levy. And that might be 50 years from now. If you only got $8 million 50 years ago, that's all you're gonna get is 50. So it doesn't matter how high they go or how low they go, they're only going to generate a certain amount of money. So our levies are getting to the point, I know there's two of them, and there are more getting to the point where we're starting to lose money.
Well, that's why it was, and I don't know if anybody was really listening when the auditor came to talk to us, and he was pretty much suggesting that those people who had, really bad damage, reach out to the office about lowering the values on their homes, without ever having to be prompted to do so. And that's going to be huge. That's going to be huge. And those values probably won't go back up for probably 5 or 10 years.
So next year, we are gonna take,
Oh,
a
absolutely.
huge
We
hit.
just got back to where we were pre-recession.
And the values,
Just we're getting back to those values.
the values were up.
And the following years, so some people rebuilt and the values will, of the individual homes will go up, but like if you drive in Westbrook, there are homes that if you, on the very end street,
Yes.
the majority of the homes are demolished still, and those people aren't coming back. So your house might be good, but
And we also want to take into consideration that that a developer is building almost 50 new homes in Wolf Creek Run.
right,
So it may balance out.
right.
But
For $160,000 homes.
So new developments, that's a good.
and they've already broke ground. So the hope is that another developer will come into Westbrook and, possibly purchase all those empty lots and do the same thing.
But as I understand it, a homeowner is still responsible for those taxes and until they then file with the county for reduction of their.
Right, but the auditor's office is actively pursuing people to give them the opportunity to reduce
Right.
their value, which is, in my opinion, something they should not be doing, especially in communities like ours that already struggle with value. So now you're going to further devalue our community and then everything attached to that valuation.
Kind of a catch-22 though, yeah.
Or he could just not actively pursue people in regards to dropping the value on the homes and leave it alone, and the values will stay as they are, regardless.
But wouldn't you think a typical homeowner that doesn't have a house that's just completely destroyed, wouldn't you think that they would go down to the county to ask for a reduction of value
No,
without being?
You don't think they
told?
did?
I don't think they would.
You don't think so?
I don't. When you talk about rebuilding your home or tearing down your home, the last thing you're thinking about is whether or not the value is going to go down, or how do you get the value to go down? So you pay less taxes. But if the county is actively pursuing, though, that is a disservice to Trotwood, a very big disservice to Trotwood, especially when the dollars that we get are attached to those value, or a portion of the dollars that we get is attached to that valuation.
So I must have missed that when you said that they were actively pursuing.
Well, that's the only reason he was here. He may not have said he was actively pursuing. How many visits we get from the auditor?
Well, I try to invite him at least once a year, just for his face on the board, to just have him to come to visit Trotwood. So there's been different reasons, but.
Well, I have my own way about how I feel about the work he does in Trotwood, but that's a conversation for another day.
Would you like me to reach out to Carl? This next slide is the same thing that I did with revenues. It's expenditures. The top $44.5 million matches line 4.5 on your 5-year forecast. And as you can see, the wages are 50%,
I'm sorry, say the line item again.
4.5.
4.5. Okay.
That's total expenditure. Wages are 50% of our total budget. We have additional 18% for benefits. We have materials and supplies, capital outlays, purchase services, which is the next larger one, 22%. I put notes on this slide to say wages and benefits are estimated to be about 68%. I actually went online yesterday, and it was called Ohio's K-12 Schools Report, and they indicated that 80% is the norm. So it looks like we are lower, obviously, 12%, 12 percentage points lower than what our typical neighbors are. Now, I can do some more research on that, but that's what I read yesterday. This next slide just breaks down even further by object. And so we talk about capital outlay, materials, purchase services, benefits, and wages. And you can see the red is the wages, benefits is blue. I think purchase services is the yellow, material is the darker color, and then there's the green color at the top. One of my favorite subjects is our school choice. And I like this schedule because it lets you know that it's about almost $6 million is flowing through our district out to community schools. So I calculated that right now our assessed valuation is $212 million. So that means 1 mil that we pass brings in $212,000. Well, if you take the total, the $7.5 million divided by the 212, that's 35 mills. And so on that, on this report, it indicates 26 mills for community, but when I add everything else, the total is 35 mills. And basically it's sucking our district. And what we've advocated for them not to, we don't want the money so that they can flow through, just put the money over here and let us see a true picture of our revenue and expenditures. But for some reason, they want to make sure the money flows through the 5-year forecast. So the summary is basically for FY20, we have to be very, 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 very vigilant on sticking to what we said in FY20. Every decision that we make should be student academic performance first. And all of that will determine then how we look in FY21 and 24. So like I said, in February, Marlon and I start sitting down. We'll look or talk through the budgeting process for this year, making sure that all voices are heard. And we will come together and hopefully we'll have buy-in of all our leaders to make sure that we can stick to the budget that we put in front of them. I just said continue to be as transparent as possible, both internal and external. So what I try to do is periodically just update you guys on things so we can be transparent so everybody, no one can ever say that we weren't transparent. Again, the House Bill 166, the frozen funding, and the revenue obviously is forecast to be flat. And then I just said economic indicators, whatever the state's going to be doing in the next couple years is going to affect our revenue. So if we come into a recession in the next couple years, our money's going to be reduced. So we just need to look at big picture, housing and jobs and reserves. And a lot of times I get reports on that so I can see where we're kind of headed.
Let me ask you something. The cash on hand balance, for 2024, the estimated or forecasted $313,443.
200.
Mine says 313.43. Were you? Oh, okay. That doesn't include investments or anything, does it?
No, it does not.
So what's the
No.
investment balance?
So the interest income is included in the revenue. So that's for
Okay.
other objects. So other objects is the interest income. So when we talked about other objects and you say, what's that extra revenue piece that is interest?
Okay. If I can just say, we can, kind of forecast or hope what the state does in regards to money that we get. But the elephant in the room is there's really only one way to effectively identify how to save this budget by 2024. There's really only one way to do it, and that's staffing. And I think that's a very difficult conversation that we need to start having now, long before 2024 gets here, to think that we as a district would have an ending cash balance of $213,000 is, that's absurd.
Yeah, and Mr. Scares, we've talked about some of those conversations and what that would look like year to year in conversations with reductions and how much that number needed to be. So we just got to be real diligent to sticking with that plan to make sure that it's not all at one time and it's a gradual step down. Mhm. And you guys are aware what that number looks like. And
That's roughly about
it's
$6
not
million.
Mhm.
$2 a year through 2024. Excuse me, $2 million a year through 2024 in staffing and benefits. And that's a difficult conversation, but a necessary one, because it would be there is no more money to go get, you talk about levies or anything like that. And I think it is less advantageous of us to depend solely on what the state will or won't do in regards to the budget, especially when we can directly control factors that would put us more favorable by 2024. It's just having the
difficult.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
Are destined to do that.
Yeah.
One of the things we did today is we spent a little time evaluating how the student wellness dollars could support some of the staffing costs, and we found roughly about, I can't remember the exact number, about $600,000 that is not reflected on here, but would contribute back to the end cash balance, but understanding that it's only for a 3 to 5 year span based upon what the wellness dollars look like in the future, or if they continue at all. There's conversation that it's going to continue, that it's going to be flat, but it's an unknown. So we have determined that we are going to pull probably $4,000 to $5,000, I can't remember exactly, out of the general fund and attribute those to the wellness dollars. And all of those will be support avenues that align with the wellness dollars. But, just with the understanding that money does not sustain.
Well, when I look at this, I don't think that we have, and because I may have just gotten here. No, I wasn't here then, I don't think. Well, maybe I was. Was the student population in 2017 higher than what it is now?
It might have been just a slightly bit.
So
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it actually was lower.
It's only grown.
Yeah.
The numbers aren't significantly different.
Right, so there isn't a huge number in terms of students from 2017 to now. So my point is that there isn't a huge staffing difference because of the number of children that we have between 2017 and today that would warrant such an exorbitant, increase in expenditures when we talk about personal services. And so I think the goal is to see what was happening in 2017, where the personal service was only $16 million, and we virtually have the same student population, give or take here or there. But it has grown over $5 million.
Yeah, and we know some of those are the support services that we put in place. So I think it is to look to see what makes sense. What of those services, how are they effectively contributing to our students,
Every day.
Yeah, every day.
Academic achievement.
Right.
Mental health.
How do they?
And I know for a fact, and I don't know if that is reflected in this budget, that the governor signed huge supports in the biennium for wraparound services. And so I think it would behoove us to kind of identify what dollars are attached to those services.
We're saying
Exactly. Right.
and I think that's what,
Identifying those services considered support or wraparounds, as we say, and then trying to really, dig down and see what is essential. Because we know with the marching orders that we have from everybody really, that wraparound services are necessary. They need support. They're providing additional funds, but we've got to kind of dig down to see what we really need.
They're providing additional funds, but they're also requiring additional staff.
So that's called unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
right,
And
So again, our challenge is to identify what is essential.
Right.
Because, and I'll say, just from the standpoint of from 17, 18, because we had this conversation. I think we look at, was it 40 plus or 50 additional positions we've had since 2017 to 2018. Now, there's some things that, you can't, you can't forsake. Say, for instance, a kid comes in and he requires a one-to-one paraprofessional because of whatever issues he have. Some of those things are mandated, but there are also some things that we have to really look at. And you talk about those hard conversations. I think we've had some over the past couple of days. We really have to identify what are essential.
and as you mentioned, the paraprofessionals, you would think that, and I don't know if you looked at that, maybe the wellness dollars can go to paraprofessionals. I don't know.
Well, we try
Maybe it's
to,
a fine line.
we get some special ed funding as well.
Oh,
And we try.
true, we do.
We've done some very creative things, and
Yeah.
again, I've been looking at the information for about a month, really, but we've done some very creative things in regards to trying to keep folks away from the general fund. But there's still some things that are there that we have to evaluate.
But you're right, it's a conversation we do have to have, and I know that you all are having it, so I guess is to share it with the board.
And I am in 100% agreement. Ultimately, the board has to have the difficult conversation amongst ourselves first, even before we see what it is that you guys are looking at, so we can be prepared to say, okay, well, what are we really, and I'm not speaking for the board by any means. I'm just saying, we need to be preemptive about having that conversation. Now, I don't want that to fall and we don't talk about it no more, because I've said that before and we've never reached back out for it.
But also think that we hope that through some attrition and through some retirement and through, we can start recouping some of those dollars. And I think, we're gonna try to be as diligent as possible, but I agree, there's nothing else I can say in regards to that. But there's some other things that we talked about looking at as well.
Because these conversations have a way of getting away from us, and then we don't talk about them again until it's too late, or until we're all on the news, and then people want to know where's all the money. And so that's a conversation. I mean, I'm only here for another 2 years.
Well, personal service has been something we've been talking about since I walked in the door.
Me too.
So-
And it's been an ongoing conversation.
It's not new.
It's not new, but looking at the bottom line figure for 2024, it's more imperative that we actually take some actions.
So my last slide was just things that we need to work on. Complete the plan for student wellness monies, complete the FY19 state audit, begin our FY21 budget preparations, and then from my office and HR to work on our frontline time and attendance project. So those are 4 major things that will keep myself and my department extremely busy between now and March.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay. Next up is Ms. Minor on the state report card review. You're right. Yes, need to go to lunch break.
5 minutes.
You know what? I'm sorry, Ms. Minor. We're gonna take a quick break, all right? Like 5 minutes and, okay, Ms. Minor, we're ready.
So I'm just gonna,
Tough it out.
tough it out. Just walk around.
Good evening. This evening, I'll be going over the Ohio report card and some additional information regarding our assessment data and progress that we're making at the district. So I think everyone has their binder, and I also provided a copy. I think Kim may have provided a copy of a PowerPoint that you have. So the binder is organized with an executive summary. We'll go over trend data, our overall grade and components, the 6 components of the report card. And then you actually have the full report cards of each building. And I also provided additional data. There was a question about our evaluation for 21st century. So I made sure that was in there from Dr. Stock. And I believe we may have even put some extra DIBBLS data that I wanted to talk about towards the back. So we'll refer to it as we go. So our Ohio report card results, as we're examining the data with the teams, we are focusing on the learning, collaboration about the data and what it means, and focusing on our results, making sure everyone's focused, understanding where we are, where we need to be, and how we'll get there collectively as we're analyzing the data. The first slide mentions the executive summary highlights, which you've got a copy of, a complete one, and I'll just go over a few points. Some of the strengths of this year's spring 2019 report card is we actually increased in 14 out of the 22 areas. 3rd grade reading went from 41% to 60%. 8th grade algebra score was 84, average proficiency 84.6% proficient, which is above our state average. Then our 4-year graduation rate moved from 83% to 90 for the 4-year, and 83% to 86% for 5-year. So those are some of the positive highlights with our report card. Some areas of concern, a big area of concern that we've been focusing on this year with our teams from the district leadership team and the building teams is our value added. Are we moving and growing all students? We scored an F in value added. And so that's something that we're focusing on. And we're actually disaggregating the data to try to get to the root cause of what's going on. Another area of concern is that only 4 out of the 22 indicators are within 20 points of the state average. And so in your binder, if you turn to the tab, the first tab, Trotwood-Madison City Schools, and and you'll see the trend data of the report card where you see the green and red. You'll see the state averages of what other districts are achieving and then the standard. And so if you look, we only have a few areas that are close. And so we know we need to make significant gains across the board. So we're monitoring that.
Now, I can't remember, Ms. Freeman brought up something about the benchmark for these numbers, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Do you guys remember? You know what I'm
I
talking
thought
about?
they
It didn't start-
increased it.
I'm sorry.
I think they've increased it, right? To 80%.
From the original 2016, yes.
Yeah,
It didn't start off that high, but now
Yeah.
it's at 80% for the state standard, yes.
and so now when you look at other districts, last year Trotwood and Dayton were the highlight F districts. But now you look, there are 11 other districts and you don't hear them on the news
Right.
at all.
Well, of course.
That are, that are sitting at F or D. It's your Huber Heights.
122 districts like us that are at the D.
Right, right,
Yeah, huge districts like Columbus.
Yes.
right.
And so looking at the state, the state averages, not many are at the 80%, but we want to get higher. We want to be closer to the state average. So those are some components that we're closely monitoring. Another area of concern, although it was a positive with our 90% for the graduation rate, our overall grade for graduation rate ended up being a C, which is something that helped pull us up to the D, is we are monitoring how many of our graduates are graduating through the traditional route of method of scoring appropriately or meeting the standard for the end of course exam, and how many are having to depend on the alternative pathway of the capstone and community service. Our goal is academic achievement for all students. We're happy that they're graduating and that there are other pathways, but our ultimate goal is for all students to achieve the academics and have opportunities in that realm. So that's just some of the concerns. So here is a picture of our overall with all the components from achievement, progress is value added, graduation rate. You can see we have Fs and we received the C in graduation rate, and our K-3 literacy is a D, and we'll dig a little deeper into that data when we get to it. But that's an area we're also monitoring closely and making a strong effort to not only make those technical changes needed, but the cultural changes that we discussed in the earlier. But this shows you an overall, the D. And so when we break down the components, the first one I'll discuss is the achievement component, which is all around our performance index. How well are all of our students doing? Are they how many pass the exam and receive the minimum standard required, and how many have moved up one level? And so I wanted to show you literally, if you turn one page and see the overall, and then turn to the page that's titled 2019 Achievement Results, you'll see a lot of the red X's down the line. And then if you look at the opposite page, you'll see the dial and the 4.2% and the F, which is referring to that overall achievement. When we say move up one level, we can see test count by level under performance index, how many students are scoring limited, 1,444. How many are scoring basic, proficient, and then it goes up from there. We increase our performance index as people get proficient, obviously, but then move up a level. So our gifted students are scoring proficient, but they're not achieving at the level that they should based on the data. And so because they're not going above proficient, that's also giving us an F for value added for our gifted. So when we say we literally need to look at all subgroups and make sure we're being intentional with our instruction, whether it be intervention or achievement and improving our overall core instruction, we can see it there. And I thought that's a better way to really understand what's going on. And then that's related to the gap closing and all of the other factors from the report card. Under value added, which is our progress, it looks closely at the growth of all students. Our score, as we know, is an F. It measures students' growth in grades 4 through 12. So although we make gains in third grade reading, that's not calculated in the value added. We did receive above expected growth, and there's a colorful chart on the next page. It says 2019 progress data for Trotwood-Madison City Schools. Where you see the line green and green, that means that there's significant evidence that they are above expected growth. If it's dark green, it's more than a year's expected growth, up to 2 years expected growth. The light green is slightly above expected growth. However, when we look at the red, you see where kids did not achieve. They were predicted to achieve based on the data and the history, but they did not. So in those areas, we have to make significant changes. There's one area that I want to bring your attention to, which is an example of something that worked. If you look under students with disabilities and then look over at 5th grade math, you'll see that they went more than a year's expected growth with that 2.2. What was different in that room is they received inclusion training and co-teaching that was effective. The teacher, the intervention specialist that taught that class actually looped up at the middle school with those kids. So that's an example of when you provide core instruction and give kids the opportunity for the full curriculum, how they can achieve, even though they had been identified special needs.
May I ask a question? And I don't mean to set nobody out or anything like that, but the data or the information is usually always identified as the kids, what they aren't doing, what they aren't getting. How much of this is actually, or could be actually, the teacher just isn't teaching proficiently enough?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because at our last meeting, we talked about the difference between technical change and cultural change. And I think we ended with, we recognized, and that's why I'm glad we're moving to the PLC culture or framework, because we have a cultural problem. We need to make cultural change where we change people's behaviors, and there's specific ways and strategies that we must do that as building leaders, as district leaders, so that all children are receiving the quality education they deserve. We focused a lot on the technical change, provide more training, buy more resources, provide all of these things. Well, we've provided all of that.
Yeah.
They have it now. We need to do the work we need to do. And that's a different way to lead. It's a different way to operate. Instead of us constantly telling them exactly how to do it, it's a collaborative spirit where they have to work, research, and come up with best practices, but not only come up with them, but implement them in the classroom and no more excuses. Our kids, we have data because we do assessments every year for gifted that shows that our kids cognitively are on par with other districts like Fairborn and Kettering. So why aren't they achieving there? And we have to constantly share that with teachers because the story you get is, oh, they come so low. Well, maybe on the crawl, they may not have been exposed to those skills, so they may score below, but cognitively, as far as their intellectual capability, they're there. So we know we need to make some changes there. And it's a cultural change.
Because I almost feel like like the only people that actually suffer really are the children.
Yes.
Because you can't get rid of a teacher beyond their contract because you can't be.
But there are things we can do.
Right, okay,
Yes.
and I get that.
There's things we have to.
Oh, okay.
That's
I'll refrain from what I want to say, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll stop. You can go ahead, I'm sorry. That frustrates me like a lot because we can tell the kids what they aren't doing, what they can't do. Maybe you just aren't teaching well.
Well, and those are the critical conversations that we're having. I'll give you an example. You know, we've had people say, oh no, they came so low and we're trying to grow them and this and that. Well, now we're pulling out data and being very strategic and showing where kids have digressed and letting the teams know and say, this has to change. Whereas that may have been avoided in the past. So those are the critical some of us here are on the leadership team and Myra was with us. And those are the conversations that are just out in front. And one thing, if we don't accept our current reality and we live in a denial state, then it won't get better.
Expound, what do you mean by that?
Where I may say, oh, the reason the scores are so low is because the kids come so low. We can't use that as an excuse because we can show data the opposite now.
You know, and to be quite, I don't even need data. Kids will they will rise to the expectation that you set for them. And I just feel like
yes,
there is just no
and
expectation.
they live up to the expectations. Yes,
Or live down to them.
and that's what we have to change.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but thank you.
That's fine. So that speaks to our equity. When we talk about gap closing, that's the first thing. And so I showed the picture. You know, are we providing a quality education to all students, regardless of who they are, where they come from? This shows how well districts and schools are meeting the performance expectations of all students. Specifically, they measure English language arts, math, and the graduation rate. And so we've got in your binder, if you turn to the next page, and you'll see it's like a red and black chart. Under the black section, those are the groups, student groups that they measure. And if you go over, because they've got a lot of columns here, but the columns that I would look at, if you look at the performance index, which is like the third one over, and then you'll see a performance index that says LY for last year. That's where they're measuring, and then you see the improvement column. They're measuring whether our kids have improved from year to year, and that's part of how they measure to close the gap. So you can see for the first one, which is English language arts, where we fell. And that's similar to our performance index numbers did not change that much. That's how we stayed at the D level. And if you look at the next page for math, we had one group, when you look at multiracial, I think that's the one that did show some gains in closing the gap. And then obviously we can see the green for the graduation rate. And that's where it was significant, where you could see the last year, this year. So that's just like a quick way to analyze it. In your binders for each building, you have these same analysis breakdowns. So you can see how each building is doing.
So can we share from our district leadership aid because I missed it.
What did we do with the how did we use the data?
How did we use the data in increasing like math? So we had the one teacher that far exceeded, was it in 8th grade?
Math.
Eighth grade math.
Middle school.
Yeah. So how did he do that? And when we talk about our best practices within our district, that is clearly, he blew it off the charts. So what did he do that we can take? And I think Mr. Mr. Gibson
Gibson.
shared some of that,
Mhm.
right?
In the retreat.
In the retreat.
And so, Mr. Rogers, who was with us, provided standards-based instruction on the standard. He didn't lower it. And we talked about that, we teach at raising the expectation. We have very effective, when we talk about the resources and we talk about the C, like what are the curriculum resources we have? We've purchased some of the things that are ranked some of the best in the United States as far as effectiveness. So one intervention that helps close the gap is called ALEC. And it's offered, we provide it to grades 7 through on up 12 for all math. Using that effectively, it closes the gap. And Mr. Rogers, we've had it for 3 years, and he's gotten better every year, and he uses it with fidelity. And so that's something we will need to scale up and make sure everyone else is using it with fidelity. And so we started last year monitoring and pulling the data on each classroom and then giving those teachers feedback. They see clearly that this is an example of what we need to do. And that's what he did. And so the goal is for all the classrooms. Now, honestly, the skill level of some of the new teachers we received are not at his level. So that's an area that I'm afraid we may take a drop because their skill level of instruction is not the same, the new teachers we got in. Hindsight, I don't know. One thing we put in place with grant funding this year is to kind of put it out there, retention dollars, so that if someone like that does come across the HR director's desk or whatever, there's already a pot of money to kind of counter to try to keep them. Because I believe in fighting for good people and not letting them just walk out the door.
Yeah, so
it's a combination of things. But the teachers that he worked with are still doing those practices. Will it be as strong as his 84%? I'm not sure. At the middle school, we've got two classes of 6th graders that because of their scores, they're under an accelerated track, and that's providing them higher instruction. Those are things that will help us with the performance index points, and we're looking forward to their achievement. But again, we've got to make sure the beliefs and behaviors of the teachers meet the needs of those learners. But what we've done, which is a change, is prior to this year, it was a struggle for us to even help some of the educators recognize we can have additional AP courses. Before, it was only English language arts. Well, now we have it in every core content plus art. And we know it's a struggle to make sure those teachers don't fall back and think, oh, they can't do. We've got to constantly put those messages out there. That's through education and then just strong expectations of their behaviors. We can't change people's beliefs, but we can change their behaviors.
yeah, because one of the things, remember we had the walkthroughs they were doing, and you wouldn't know that, but we were even giving bonuses, I remember, for, I know it was at the high school, for the number of walkthroughs that the principals were doing. Is that who we were giving them to?
We weren't
So
giving
we're-
bonuses. I think they were just required to do X amount of walkthroughs.
I remember seeing in a report that we gave a bonus at the high school to a principal because he exceeded the number of walkthroughs. Yes.
That was before.
Janice?
But I
That
can
was
tell
before.
you that
That was 8. I've been here 8 years.
Mhm.
He was- I mean, 'cause I don't remember.
No, that,
No?
I have to look.
Okay.
It was last year, wasn't it, at the high
we
school?
didn't do any bonuses.
Maybe it wasn't a
But
bonus,
there-
but they
you
got
do remember
something.
that We did recognition for principals that did the most observations.
Right,
And so you're correct. The year before, there were maybe 800 for the whole year for all administrators. And last year, there were over 3,000 by the
Yeah.
end of the year. So principals were in the classrooms. However, we've got to make sure that the feedback they give does
Right.
push
So,
the
Right.
behavior.
So
That's
it's-
how
if
Mr.
it was-
Gibson knew exactly what was different in Mr. Rogers'
Right.
work.
right.
so I'm glad you said that because I have seen teacher evaluations from this district where it was the exact same thing at every single evaluation. And I'm like, you can't be experiencing the same thing every single time you step into that classroom. It was almost verbatim. I mean, I've seen, I don't know, I probably wasn't supposed to see it, but I was
You
looking for
probably
something.
weren't.
Yeah,
Was that a records request?
it was a records request.
And you're right, and that's the feedback.
And so if they aren't providing feedback that is substantive, they can do as many walkthroughs as they want to and just say, I walked through. But if you're not offering any information that helps the teacher improve, then what good does it do? You're just saying you're walking through for the sake of walking through because we asked you to. And so it's a disservice for the child, for the administrator, for the teacher, if those things aren't being done with fidelity. And I don't know exactly how we, say, I don't know how we do that. But if those are the types of things that are happening within the district, we're never going to get anywhere.
And, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I know when we are talking about the professional learning communities and Mr. Howard, the changing the culture and climate where first and foremost, people want to be here and they want to be teaching.
Right.
And they really like what they do. Ms. Minor, you shared a story with me about personal development that the teachers have coming out of PD. And here's a good example of that, Norman. Can you share that with the rest of the board?
Yes, so one thing we know we're focused on learning, collaboration, and results. And so pushing it down to the buildings to really be creative and come up with solutions to increase the performance is something we've been focusing on this year. Different than before where we top down saying you've got to do it this way, this way, this way. Coming from within and holding the teams accountable to make a change. So one team in particular, we have designated days of professional development, just 2 hours after school. And everyone, that is a requirement. However, one particular team, because of the state of their data, said, we've got to do more. And they recognize they've got to change the culture. They had even had a big session last week on culture change. Well, they're so committed that although our school calendar says everybody's off Thanksgiving week, they're coming in that week, bringing everyone in and doing a whole day retreat about the culture. And so we've got to change. So those changes are happening and people are stepping up to the plate where they hadn't before. I'm not going to say we're going to wave a magic wand and scores are going to instantly go up, but that's what it's going to take, ownership at all levels and support for those people that are doing it and the resources, the book that we all have, Transforming Your Culture, it talks to that. It speaks to how you change that and what are the different types of staff members and how do you address them? Those that want to live in the status quo, but some people don't want to change. And so there's strategic things to do. So our meetings with the principals is covering that. So different than, you're right, them just doing a bunch of walkthroughs for a piece of paper, checking a box. It's at a whole different level this year. And we have to do it that way because we know the results are going to stay the same. We'll go up and down in certain areas, but there won't be a consistent climb. And we have to do that.
Talk a little bit about the descriptive feedback training that you took a team to.
So we have, we're also providing training on descriptive feedback. So it's done totally different. Principals then go to a site and they have to give feedback to a teacher in front of the trainer, and the trainer on the spot in front of everybody says, no, this, and this. So the level of training is even different. And then the expectations then when we're looking at their comments, like you were able to see, we're looking for those 30-second feedbacks and things like that that are really quick. That doesn't take a lot of time, but it's more effective. So those are some changes that are happening. So I'll give you an example, and Ms. Freeman missed it, but when we were at the DLT, we handed out data for all of the groups that we just looked at, like the gap closing. all of the subgroups. And
Okay,
it literally said whether they were on level or not for reading, on level or not for math, and how many years below or above. And it categorized them by students with disabilities, by each individual category, because I have an IEP doesn't mean I have a cognitive delay. So we showed how many kids that have no cognitive delay are below level. Why is that? That's a question we asked. We showed gifted kids in their category, and how many of those they should be accelerated in advance. How many are below level? Why is that? That level of questioning we hadn't done. So the teams have to, and I had people call me today about it, share that with their entire staff. In some cases, teachers never would even get that information. It might stop at the principal's desk and never get shared. Maybe they don't have the courage to confront, but we don't have a choice now.
so it's shared in their building leadership team?
Well, it's beyond that, because we already shared it with the building leadership team. When we shared it with the building leadership team on a Saturday, we had the names in there. And people started questioning, oh, this kid, that kid, or whatever. I took the names off. Okay, let's wipe this out, because it's not about the kid. It's about our system.
Right,
So they have it, but I'm saying the entire staff.
okay.
Because if the entire staff doesn't know our current reality, how do we make a change?
So is that system, is that process something that is going to, I'm sorry, I got my daughter a phone. She thinks it's okay to keep FaceTiming me. I apologize. Is that something that will be consistent? Is that going to be ingrained into the life of Trotwood-Madison?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, so that's the PLC. You know, we don't, let's say leadership change, I'm gone, Marlon's gone, whatever. If we do this right, 10 years from now, this practice will stay. And that's the goal. That 10 years from now, this is the norm, not the exception. That we're digging down when people aren't achieving, we're gonna find out why. So I have data in here at the end, and hopefully they put it in there. So we have the K3 literacy, we know it's a D, and that's surface level. Well, we went and pulled each grade level and showed what they were at the beginning of the year for the Dibbles data, where you take them one-on-one and check their reading skills, and what it was at the end. So one particular grade level digressed. So they have to answer to that. We don't expect that to happen this year. It's in their book.
So I'm not one for creating unnecessary policy, but to kind of make sure that that doesn't go anywhere, even when leadership changes or who's here, who's not, that is something that is set in stone, that system is secure, especially if we know it is effective at enhancing, increasing achievement. Is there a, what am I trying to say? That's in writing, that is you have a platform of what that looks like?
That's our plan that we're following this year, our district leadership plan. And the plan is a living document, so.
Can it be?
But what I hear you saying, I could just speak to what some other districts have done. And we're really talking about equity and making sure all kids get what they deserve. And some districts have created something called equity policy. An equity policy, and they've written it, and that has been in place. Baltimore City, I'm trying to think of some of the others that you can look online and see an example of how it's worded. And that, so where we fought for certain kids to have access to gifted education, and we won, you know, but it's just was a process through these years. An equity policy, we could have said, well, board policy says.
Can we get that? Can you send that to him and send that to us? Just to see it?
It's the Baltimore City Schools, yeah, look it up. I did. So that's just, so in summary, this is our form to it.
There, Scott?
Might be going out there
Okay.
under the car.
I thought it smelled something.
What's
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
that
The smell?
yeah.
It's because of the construction.
Well, yeah, we've been having some issues with fumes as well, but that one smells a little natural.
You know what I thought that was? I thought that
Little
was
natural.
cannabis. Are we being paid?
Is it? And we also had a plumbing backup today.
Okay,
So,
so that's
We've
the.
had a couple issues with the building.
Nice. Somebody smells like.
I thought maybe the coffee
They smell like weed.
That might be.
Since college.
our three big ideas of our professional learning communities is focus on the learning, collaboration, and focus on results. However, our four critical questions that every team must answer and go through and address are on the screen. What do we want our students to learn? How will we know if they learned it? What will we do if they've not learned it? And how do we support those who have already learned it? So following those four questions, that's the PLC questions that are mandated. We're covering all learners. And so in the back of your, under extra paper, if you go right behind towards the back, you see a curriculum instruction diagnostic reading. I'm just going to explain just the first page, and then you'll have the second. This is an overview of our K-3 reading, and it talks about approximately 203 students this year are showing they need intensive support. One thing we've done at the preschool level is we've increased the rigor of the assessments, the formative assessments we're using, something called PELI. So they're coming in with stronger, we felt that they weren't being challenged enough, our preschoolers, so that's changing. And then we're monitoring closely. So if you turn to the next page, I'll show you an example of the level of data that we're looking at and then asking those questions about. You can see the beginning of the year, end of the year, which was BOY and EOY. Beginning of the year last year, there were 65 that were kindergartners, needed intensive support. At the end of the year, it dropped to 39. And then you can look at the mid-range, the yellow, and then those in the green, on track, and then those above average. So those likely to achieve in the green. It went from 35 at the beginning of the year and increased to 70, and then the blue 46 to 39. So we're watching those numbers and watching those groups. And then it's for every grade level, and then their composite scores and everything, so you have that. And we also have, as I mentioned, the full evaluation report about our 21st century learning, and in there you'll see we're compared to national average for our K-3 program, and we're above national average for performance for that. So any questions, additional questions?
Wonderful. I would like, at some point, a follow-up on how the system is working.
Yes.
Just, when you get an opportunity to kind of expand it and things like that.
So we can share like the minutes to our DLTs and things like that, to give a DLT report, and that shows what everybody's doing. Thank you.
And we talk about those hard conversations we have to have monetarily. We gotta start having them educationally and structurally as well. The professional learning community forces you to do some reflection. And when we talk about focusing on learning, we're not only talking about learning for kids, we're talking about learning for adults as well. And I think where we are now within the last 3 or 4 months, I just think, especially with our DLT and our BLTs and our principals retreat, we're starting to really look in the mirror. And I think that's the first step to change, and really getting people to understand that we know our kids have issues. We know our kids come with, but we gotta do what we have to do to ensure that these kids are achieving and putting forth the effort and not holding those implicit biases against these children. And I think we're on a start. And again, it's not a magic pill, it's not a magic bean, but I think we're at a point where people are really starting to have some hard conversations, because you have kids, my son being one of them, who was identified as being gifted, but he scored basic on one of the tests because the rigor was probably not there. So, and I'm not bringing a personal reflection into this, but it's the truth. But I know what his issues are at home, but I also know some of the concerns that I have in the classroom. And I think it's imperative that we continue to force people to talk to one another and use the data to say, this kid scored proficient or above proficient or accelerated every year he's been in school. Why all of a sudden is he at basic? What's going on? And I think we've done a good job, and I'm gonna give Ms. Minor credit for really digging deep into a professional learning community, because it's what you make it. And if you focus on those three concepts and you force people to reflect, you're gonna see movement.
You know, I think you're absolutely correct. And I think from creating whatever that new culture will be through.
It's a fight. It's
is.
not a.
They don't want to change.
It's going to be a fight. And then when you got.
And the fight, and sometimes you got to take a blow here and there. But I think ultimately there's no room for, I don't want to do it. You know, especially if what we're doing is data driven and data based, this is what you do, or let me not pretend like I ain't Norman. This is what you do, or you don't work here anymore, because ultimately it is all about the kids. And yeah, I'm going to be a bit biased, you know, because I have children here. You don't get to make those excuses, not when in exchange for what we give you or what you're doing is your salary. Like, you know, and it's not being mean. It is not being, you know, you don't get to make excuses. Either you do what is expected of you that is data driven and data based, or you maybe this isn't your field. You know, maybe you need to go to HR. Maybe you need to do something else. But when it comes down to these kids, not just mine, not just Mr. Howard's, but everybody's, they can do what we expect them to do, and don't degrade who they are or their abilities because you're too lazy to do it. And that's.
And here's the contrasting point to that, because I definitely understand that. But from the standpoint of initially,
Right.
we've got to get people to buy in.
Agreed.
And believe that they can do some extraordinary things with some extraordinary kids.
Sure.
And I think if you get to the point where you have collective groups of staff, collective groups of people buying into these kids can learn, you start having some outliers that end up walking away anyway. And that's ultimately what you see in a true professional learning community. If you got that one person that closes their door, keeps to themselves, and doesn't share and doesn't collaborate, then ultimately it doesn't become comfortable. It becomes uncomfortable for them. And that's, in essence, that's our hope, because we're having some face-to-face conversations now. We have some true conversations about this data, and I think it's a step in the only direction, not the right direction, the only direction.
So really, what I hear you saying is that the PLC is really and truly to set the stage for buy-in, because we've not had buy-in in the past. And I mean, not just last year, but even prior to that. So in order to get the district to move, we've got to get people to buy in. If they're not here to buy in, then again, it may be not a good environment.
Well, if you believe in learning, if you believe in...
We hope they all believe in
exactly.
that. I mean,
Right.
we hope they all believe in that.
And if you don't, then ultimately you become a weirdo, or you see what I'm saying? I hate to use that term, But you know, if everybody around you is talking about
Yeah.
these kids can learn.
Yeah,
these
and you're
kids can
saying that
do
they
it,
can't.
right.
You're an
You
outcast.
become a problem.
Yeah, and that's what we're saying, yeah.
And it has to be infectious. It has to be something that we constantly talk about, that we constantly.
You can kind of see it too, like even in the DLT, you can kind of see it kind of parting ways. You can see certain people who are buying in and certain people who aren't.
Right.
You can see it happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, teaching is a calling, and I don't think people get into the profession for the sake of making money. You know, they may end up that way, but I think ultimately, they really want to do what is best for children.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
Well, and another part of that, teaching is a science. It is not easy in those classrooms. I mean, Myra, you're a professor. I spoke with one of our counterparts across the country, and that we were talking about teaching and learning. And it is, kids got to know why they need to know this. And you're in the front of the class, and if you are just filling out facts, they don't understand that. It's a waste of time for them. And that's why you have those highly gifted children that are failing. I mean, we've got gifted kids that are failing. And so teaching is a science, and it's not an easy job. But again, we have the supports for those teachers, the development for those teachers, the consistent coaching for those teachers and principals, then we can get there.
And the encouragement too. We want teachers to feel like they have the freedom to try different things.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we've had a culture over the last few years where that's not what they felt. They were just kind of waiting on
Not just a few
somebody.
years.
Yeah.
It's been going on for a
Yeah.
while. So, you know, I want to say that because this didn't happen overnight. It didn't. As a matter of fact, it's been going on for about 6 to 7 years. Okay, so it's a huge leap. It's a quantum leap with trying to shift the mindsets of folks.
In some cases, the teachers are buying in and they're so used to someone mandating they do things a certain way, they're even afraid to step out of the box and do it. And are asking us 10 times, can I do it this way? And I was like, yes, as long as it's at the level of the standards. So we're having to shift those cultures. Marlon's right. So, you know, they're asking us and emailing us, can we do it this? Yes. But sometimes when you're under the watch of the state, they come in and they want you to do it just a certain way. Well, our kids are different and we need diverse ways and flexibility of freedom to reach them different ways. Today, we had the same situation. Some of our support people from the state were trying to lead us back into that relegated way that doesn't really work. And I'm gonna have to have a conversation with them about, we're not going backwards. Our teachers need to be free to have the flexibility to think and create those engaging lessons for our kids. So that's another thing that just happens to districts in our situation.
Well, I mean, and if you give pushback towards what the state is recommending because you know best, or we know what is best for our kids, I mean, ultimately, if there are repercussions behind that comes through this body. And then I think we'll have the, you know, we'll have the conversation and have your back because we, you know.
And we'll have the conversation at the highest level. Okay, because again, we know our kids and we know what they need. Yeah. Thank you.
That's good.
All right. I now need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I will second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any questions? Being none, Ms. Allen, will you call the roll?
Mr. Scares?
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman?
Yes.
Mrs. Jeter Freeman?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes, motion passes. Meeting.
I'm trying to look at that, what do you call it?